I'm with Victoria Tauli Corpuz, is the special reporter for the United Nations on the indigenous people rights. So, Victoria, thank you for the interview. And I would like to know first, how is the situation of the indigenous people?
In the world, in general.
Yeah.
Well, the situation of indigenous peoples generally in the world is that many of them are being disenfranchised of their rights to their lands, territories, and resources through different means like expansion of agribusiness, plantations, infrastructure development, through extractive industries like mining, oil extraction, as well as the imposition of some development projects that are done without their consent. So that's the general picture of many indigenous peoples in various parts of the world.
And now in the region, how is the situation? I know you were in Peru and Honduras.
Yeah.
So now in Mexico. So how do you evaluate the situation of the indigenous people?
Well, in Latin America, I managed to do an official country visit in Honduras, in Paraguay, and Brazil. And also, I can speak with authority on those countries because I did an official country report on those countries. And generally, what I have seen in those three countries is that I have seen indigenous peoples whose rights to their lands are violated because of the expansion of agribusiness corporations like soya plantations, sugar cane, as well as expansion of cattle ranches. So that's one common thing I've seen. Secondly, there's also been a lot of violence against indigenous peoples because they are resisting the encroachments on their lands. And thirdly, I also found out that in these countries, even if there are favorable decisions made by the Inter-American Court in Human Rights, like in Paraguay, there were 3 decisions. In Brazil as well, these decisions are not enforced by the state. So this in addition to their displacement from their lands, is also another cause of concern because favorable decisions are already done to give back the lands to them, but the enforcement is not done yet, and there is no compensation or remediation of the damage that has been done to them.
And what are your recommendations to protect the rights of these people?
Well, I think the state has the duty to protect the rights of indigenous peoples to their territories and lands, to their cultures, and the states must be able to do, enact the necessary legislation to protect these rights, but also have the capacity to enforce this legislation. There are many laws that are very good in Latin America, and I see that the ratification of ILO Convention 169 has been done extensively. But again, the implementation and enforcement of this convention is there's still a very long way to go. So I think the states have to have the political will to respect those rights and to also recognize that indigenous peoples are not the problems for them. Indigenous peoples have contributed a lot in saving the remaining forests in this region, the high biodiversity areas, watersheds, and these are major contributions to development. But somehow these are not recognized, and instead of even rewarding them for that, their rights are being violated, and there's a lot of impunity against indigenous peoples as well.
Okay, and now you are here in Mexico for a meeting on the consultation on these people. So, what is your comments or your words on this situation? How the consultation is important to protect the rights of the indigenous people?
The President of Mexico went to the United Nations last year during the World Conference of Indigenous Peoples, and he spoke and he said that as the President of Mexico, he would indeed like to harmonize the laws of Mexico to be consistent with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So I think that's a very good signal from the head of state, and I certainly hope that Mexico is really going to legislate to make a law that is law on indigenous people's rights, in particular the law on consultations, which will really be consistent with the international standards set in international human rights arenas. No? And I wish that the promise of the president during the World Conference is really going to happen. I heard a lot about how indigenous people still are continuing to experience violation of their rights, and of course there are cases of displacements, disappearances, and I certainly hope this is going to be addressed by the government as well.
Okay. You mentioned the situation of the discrimination, the violence, and the climate change also it's impacting all these people. So what can we do to help them?
Well, I think that first of all, there really needs to be a strong effort on the part of the dominant society as well as the state to really map out those communities where the remaining forests are, for instance. Because from what I have seen, many of the remaining forests here in Mexico are really indigenous people's forests. No? So if this is true, and they are the ones who are conserving those forests to be able to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, then I think Mexico, in its national contribution, nationally determined contribution to climate change, should respect the rights of these peoples to continue protecting these forests and using their traditional knowledge to protect those forests as well. I also have seen that many of the watersheds, the important biodiversity hotspots, also coincide with the sacred sites of indigenous peoples. So the rights of indigenous peoples to maintain those sacred sites, the right to continue their culture and spirituality in those sacred sites should be respected as well and protected. I think if the government does this, then it can indeed contribute to climate change crisis, and at the same time, there will be less conflicts in the country. So for me, I believe that it is to the self-interest of governments and private corporations to really protect indigenous peoples, because by doing so, they are enhancing their contributions to peace, to maintaining peace within the country, as well as maintaining the diversity, both biocultural diversity, and also maintaining the contributions that they can provide to resolve the climate change problem.
Do you have some example of good practice
on consent? Yeah. Well, yes. I come from the Philippines, and I mentioned in my speech that the Philippines has a very good law, which has very substantive references to free, prior, informed consent. So there are cases where the consent process has been done very well, and the indigenous peoples made the decisions whether they will accept, say, a hydroelectric dam, a mini dam, or they will reject it, and in some cases they accepted. There is a case where a big mining corporation, an American corporation, wanted to mine a place in my region, actually, and the people did the consultation process. In the end, they agreed that they will not accept this company to operate in their land. So nothing has happened. So there are good practices both in terms of indigenous peoples agreeing and carving out how to share the benefits, how to mitigate the bad social and environmental impacts, and also in both of indigenous peoples rejecting a project. I think those are the good practices that exist, and I think we can search for many more. Here I heard about San Luis Potosí people saying that they have developed their own consultation process, and I think indigenous peoples developing their own consultation protocols is another good practice, and that should really be looked more deeply into by governments, because maybe that's one of the solutions to the constant problem of conflicts because of the free, prior, informed consent violations.
Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, do you have something more to add?
Well, I think that the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights is really an office that's very important here in Mexico. And I would like that the Office of the High Commissioner play a very important role in terms of providing technical advice both to the government as well as enhancing the capacities of indigenous peoples themselves. And I would like to congratulate the Office of the High Commissioner for this forum, because I think this helps in promoting my mandate of raising public awareness and expressing my views about very crucial issues here in this country.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay.
Victoria Tauli Corpuz.
Corpuz, yeah.
Thank you for the interview.
Thank you.